We're gonna go ahead and get started. Micah, Central Chair for the Plant Society. Do we have any announcements before we get started?
One, as of today, I can let everybody in the room know first thing that Oklahoma has been, or that April has been declared native plant month for the state of Oklahoma by your governor. So, for the Oklahoma Native Plant Society. Yeah. If you're in organizations and that information would be helpful to your membership, please get it out. Barbara, would you put it on Facebook or any other stuff? And maybe if you can add it to our website or whatever. Okay. So let people know. And any walkabouts or field trips lined up in the next few weeks that the membership needs to know about?
Is the mushroom walk?
That's in May.
That's in May.
Do we have anything in April? Do we have anybody here from maybe the Northeast chapter? Right over there?
That is the first Saturday in October. Rush Trail, which is yellow violet, puffy blooming, and holly and different things like that. April 22nd, Keystone State Park. Oh, and Keystone is the next.
Go ahead and encourage you, if you're just maybe inclined to look into that, jump online periodically, Oklahoma Native Plants or oknativeplants.org, and it usually has an updated list of what's happening and where it's going to happen.
And at Keystone, when we were out there, I think we haven't been out there for a couple of years, Sandy, but when we were out there, we saw shooting stars.
I don't know if we do this very often. Derek, I met, is new. Okay, I think you ought to give a speech. Sorry, Derek. But we have a new member. He was at the OSU.
Yeah.
And that's when he signed up, and I met him for the first time. And so we have a new member.
Well,
We may have others.
Yeah, other new members, stand up if you're new members. Anybody else besides? Okay.
And
we're meeting on Saturday. I'm not going to be there.
Is that going to be on the website, Joe?
That'll have to be on the website because it's not determined. Yeah, but I'm glad you mentioned it because I've got to get that arranged.
So it's going to be on the website.
Yeah.
But it will be on there.
So do we have a drop-in date for registration on that?
24.
When you register, it's got my phone number on there, so if you do have any questions or something, please just give me a call. But we'll try and have all the information on the website.
And then if the Friday night buffet is really Saturday night, so if you have a form, don't be alarmed by that. Okay, the date's wrong, but you're gonna eat on Saturday, right?
Friday night is just to get together and chew the fat, and then Saturday.
Was anybody like one of the launching of the other launching there? Like the Stardust and Foundation and.
Well, I would have Saturday night, there were still rooms at Plantation and then just had a room there. So I just.
Oh, they wouldn't book a block.
But
That's
you know, like
Right.
Saturday
Every
night.
block.
But they have rooms
So-
for them.
And they do block, they just don't do it at this time. Something happened. Okay, they said, we are not blocking at this number.
Well,
So-
I'm scheduling, but I'm trying to find it.
It was,
Plantation has got great reviews.
$99 for a king at the Plantation and $109. So. Like I said, Saturday night, we're gonna be in town, so
Yeah.
maybe if we don't want to drive back to Medicine Park after the Saturday night.
Oh, in town.
Yeah, that's.
It's gonna be at the
It's not-
gym. The water.
And then also there won't be a monthly continuous pay because of wow. So keep that in mind. And yeah, we get started. All right. Okay. So guys, this is Vonceil Harmon, natural resources biologist. She's gonna speak to us about pollinator habitat on working landscape. So thank you for coming, and it's an honor.
Thank you all for having me. If we make it to, let's see, it's 6:05. If we make it to 8 o'clock, I will have been talking about monarchs today for 12 hours. So I'm very excited to come and share some information with you guys. Yes, as I am a natural resources biologist. I'm a contract sponsored natural resources biologist at the University of Oklahoma. As a disclaimer, I have to say that I'm not here representing the university or my contract sponsor tonight. But I would like to say that maybe I'm representing the monarch butterflies that are flying through our state right now. Sorry, it's I'm having a little awkward moment because I'm not used to looking at these. So, as most of you know, we have two monarch populations, the eastern and the western. And the eastern and the western populations both have had population, they've been fluctuate year to year with environmental changes. However, since the mid-2000s, the overwintering numbers for both populations have been steadily on the decline, and as we know, with climatic conditions have been steadily on the rise, changing, fluctuating climatic conditions, and they've become a lot more extreme. For our discussion this evening, we're going to mostly talk about the eastern population. The eastern population is the one that migrates through Oklahoma. It has been in decline for the last 29 years. And larger fluctuations of the population, or more extreme fluctuations, have been occurring since the 1990s. The service estimated last year that up to an 80% probability of the extinction, of the collapse of the eastern monarchs within 50 years. The 2022-23 overwintering numbers came out on March 21st. What we saw was a 22% decline from last year. So basically, I know this indicates kind of a bleak forecast for the monarch, but what I would like to do this evening is tell you about how a lot of organizations and a lot of dedicated individuals are coming together to try and rescue these species. So to understand how we can help, we first must understand what the threats are. And we're talking habitat loss in the monarchs' breeding grounds and along migratory pathways, and their overwintering sites. The slide you see there up at the top, someday somebody will find me a laser pointer, is actually the overwintering reserve. And so you can see where, this is all supposed to be just like in biosphere reserves, there's always like a area of activity, then there's a buffer area, and then there's the core area. And the core area is always, always, always protected. This area that is where there are activities, allowed activities, is becoming more and more clear-cut, more thinned. They're starting to come up the mountain. So we're starting to see in Mexico that even though the North American threats are still more severe, we're starting to see a lot of threats happening around the reserves. So that is concerning. Climate patterns, as we know, are becoming more and more severe. The drought last year, no doubt, affected the overwintering numbers that we got reported. Just like I said, I'm still kind of in shock, but we're at this position. But so those climate patterns are also starting to cause a lot of problems. I know just this rainstorms we had recently, a lot of the monarchs got stuck in Texas, got kind of in fluctuation. And of course, insecticide exposure, that we're still using pesticides and herbicides. A lot of our larger corporations in agriculture are still using herbicides and pesticides at an unreasonable rate. So declining trends actually led in 2014 to for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was petitioned in 2014 to list the monarch butterfly as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, or the ESA. This slide illustrates kind of the regulatory pathway that the listing for the monarch took. There was a petition in 2014. Then there was a 90-day subsequent finding, which led to the candidate designation for the species. So at that point, the service kind of dragged their feet a little bit. And so some organizations that shall not be named, oh, what the heck, Center for Biological Diversity and the Center for Food Safety got a little hot about the slow response to the petition. And so they filed a lawsuit, which was settled in 2016. And at that point, the service started doing the species assessment. And so they did the status assessment between 2016 and 2019. They asked for an extension in 2019 because what was happening during this time was we were seeing these trends, and I know anybody who's been a monarch fan has watched these overwintering numbers come. And so since I think it's like 2004, we were still seeing like 18 hectares, 11 hectares of overwintering sites. So we were still in good range. And then we started dropping to the 9s. Then we started dropping to the 6s. And then we started seeing 2s and 1s. There was, I think it was 2004, 2005, we dropped to 1.6 hectares of overwintering. So these fluctuations started being very, very severe. And so that's why they asked for extension, because we would get a really good overwintering number that was dropped in. So they asked for an extension. They did another 12-month finding. They decided at that point that it was warranted for listing, but precluded because they had other species that they felt were more of a high priority or who had been on the list longer. And you can actually go on the Fish and Wildlife Service and you can look at the candidate species list, and it's ever growing, of course, but you can see where there were species ahead of the monarch butterfly. So at that point, we were expecting, and they had announced that there would be a decision in 2024. Well, we just found out a few weeks ago, they have decided to move that timeline up, and we are expecting a decision in November of 2023. So, you know, this is coming down the pike, and with a 22% decline in the overwintering numbers this year, implications are possibly it might get listed as endangered, but in 2017, during the assessment, there was a group, it was Wayne Throckmorton from the U.S. Geological Survey and a group of managers, conservationists, universities that got together, and they called themselves the Monarch Conservation Science Partnership. And they published some groundbreaking research on what was going on with the eastern population. And what they believed was that multiple cuts were leading to 1,000 deaths here. And they thought the most important was the loss of milkweed, which, as we all know, especially you guys know, milkweed is the plant of the monarch. The whole life cycle of the monarch revolves around milkweed. So they felt that the loss of milkweed was the most important. And so they were looking at how they could call for an immediate tri-national conservation strategy to address the imminent population extinction and to hold the population at 6 hectares. They believed that was a sustainable population. So 6 hectares of overwintering butterflies. Put that into perspective, 1 hectare, they estimate, holds 127 butterflies. So 127 million butterflies. Yeah, let me check my math before I go any farther. So, I'm sorry, 1 hectare is 21.1 million, 6 hectares is 127 million. And it takes 29 milkweeds to sustain 1 fall migrating butterfly. So what we really need here is 36 billion milkweed stems to sustain a 6-hectare overwintering population. So what from that study also, what they estimated from citizen science conservation groups and what they knew was already on the landscape, we needed 1.8 billion more milkweeds to reach that 36 billion. So given that, in 2015, industry there was a rights of ways habitat working group that was hosted by the Energy Resources Center at the University of Illinois, Chicago. They've been doing a lot of research at the university for energy sector and for transportation industry. But when it became very clear that the monarch was probably going to get listed, they petitioned the researchers at the Energy Center to get together and try and find some way to create a strategy about creating habitat conservation benefits. So the request was in direct response to the ESA listing. The working group itself was communicating with over 160 partners, industry partners. So they got together and they started looking at different strategies. In 2017, 40 of those participants started their own working group to develop a candidate conservation agreement that would be a nationwide agreement on energy and transportation lands to benefit the monarch butterfly. And so this was probably one of the fastest candidate conservation agreements ever envisioned. They got it done. It was approved, or it was finalized in April the 3rd of 2020, and then it was approved by the service in April 7th, 2020. And partners started enrolling in that agreement immediately. So one of the things, just kind of step back and talk about candidate species. Under Section 4 of the ESA, candidate species are plants and animals for which the service has sufficient information to list, but for other reasons, they have not developed a proposed listing regulation plan, and so it is precluded for higher priority listing candidates. So being a candidate, you're thinking, oh, well, we should have gotten the species listing. In some ways, being a candidate is almost a better designation, because even though they don't receive any protection, the ESA requires the service to consider efforts being made to protect the species. That's why these candidate conservation agreements can work, especially in the case of this species, because the implications of endangered species that can be on your landscape at any time, anywhere, that's a really hard species to manage. So with a candidate conservation agreement, industry can sign on and they can say that we're going to manage for the species, we're going to manage certain lands for the species, and those efforts will account for benefit to the species. And then when they look at a listing, they can say, well, look, this much habitat is being saved, these many milkweed are being added to the landscape. So a candidate species actually enjoys in some ways maybe better protection than even the endangered listing. And it also creates these public-private partnerships where people are partnering together to make a difference. So what is a CCAA? It's a formal voluntary agreement with the service. It must provide net conservation benefits. It must address manageable threats under the owner's control. And it also provides assurances to all of the participants and ensure that no additional conservation measures will be added once the species is listed. CCAA participants agree to a menu of preset conservation measures, and that they can pick and choose from. And so what really does the CCA provide beyond an endangered species listing? Long-term benefits to the monarch butterfly, voluntary conservation measures aligned with industry practices. It creates these public-private partnerships. So it gives a lot of flexibility to companies and agencies, and it avoids costly delays to construction and maintenance. And as you can see from that menu of conservation measures, a lot of that is stuff that industry is already doing. OG&E has a solar array that they are already doing. They've already planted pollinator gardens there. There's many solar arrays that are been doing bee habitat on their solar arrays. A lot of industry has already been doing this for a long time. So they can pick and choose from this menu. And so how does that work? Well, as illustrated here in this utility corridor, a company can enroll either all of their land system or part of their land system in the CCAA agreement. After they enroll their acres, then they can have subs. Then they identify adopted acres where they enroll lands. They enroll lands where they believe that they can do some of those conservation measures. And once the adopted acres are identified, what is required is a commitment to implement and track the conservation measures they have agreed to. And then they report and monitor the benefits. And that is done through through counting milkweed stems. So they're just using milkweed as their monitoring and tracking. And so how much is required? We have a percentage of sector broken out by the sector. So you have transmission, distribution, generation. That is 18% of their enrolled lands. Transportation is 8%. Highway and county is 5%. And so those percentages came from that all hands on deck, the all hands on deck report. So those were figured out as to how much each of the right-of-ways, as they knew it in 2017, how much benefit each of the right-of-way lands could give. And so then they worked out those sectors. So each of those sectors are required to manage the adopted acres at that percentage. So when we talk about net conservation benefit found within these right-of-ways, we can point to kind of broad linear networks that intersect a variety of landscapes. And they're talking, forested areas, park areas, grasslands. What we're really talking about is areas that will have a minimum amount of disturbance and a lot of continuity. These right-of-way networks, pretty much crisscross the United States. Most interestingly, if you look at where these hubs are, in the top, you see the oil and gas pipeline, the interstate oil and gas pipeline. In the middle, you see the interstate and state highway system. And below, you see the transmission, electric transmission grid. And all of those mirror exactly the Eastern Monarch Flyway. So you can see that those will provide a whole lot of benefit. Utility right-of-ways are 12 million acres. Highway right-of-ways equal to about 17 million acres. Nationally, when we designed and opened up the CCAA for partners to sign on to, we all agreed that 2 million acres was going to be our target. So how have we done so far? This shot right here, the Right-of-Ways Habitat Working Group actually has a public portal where partners' results of their efforts. You can go on this. I have actually a link to this at the end of the presentation. And you can go on this and you can see what's happening in your state. And it's broken out by sector, by state. It's even broken out by county. You can see where we're progressing towards our goal. These numbers right here were taken about probably about a week ago, and were pulled off of the website. So you can see where we're at. We've got 31 participating organizations, 115,000 acres, 16 million estimated milkweed stems, which that makes me smile, and 535,000 total estimated monarch butterflies have been sustained by our efforts since 2020. I got update on these numbers today. And so in 2022, they're still processing all of our annual reports right now. So we will not have a final report until mid-May. But in 2022, so far, it was the largest monitoring effort across the United States, across the lower 48. 36 organizations now have signed on to this. 2 of those organizations are here in Oklahoma. One of them is ONEOK, and the other one is, of course, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. So we have energy and we have transportation sectors. And so far, our adopted acre total as of today is 823,000 acres across the United States. And that's only in the second year of this agreement. We have 5 years to reach our target. What we discovered last year when we were doing the milkweed count, we exceeded our estimated milkweed count for the agreement by 300 times. That was throughout by 300 times what we expected was in the landscape in the lower 48. So our efforts alone have discovered that we have more milkweed than we knew. We're discovering different land areas where we didn't think that it was possible that the monarchs would be using those areas or that milkweed would be growing in those areas. I know one of our Minnesota DOT partners reported there's milkweed growing in the cracks on their bridge decks. So don't underestimate that a plant's going to make it back. You guys I'm talking to the choir here. So that's pretty exciting that we have come this far and that we are going so much farther. So how can you help? I pretty much know that these measures I am again talking to the choir, creating habitat by planting milkweed and nectar plants. You guys know this. The thing that I can really say to this group is advocate. It's like, you guys are the experts. People are going to come to you and they're going to look at you guys as experts. If you are doing this, if you can advertise what you're doing, if you can go to your nurseries, to those big box stores that are selling plant material and just say, hey, I plant this and this and this, and it's very successful. It's really getting out there and telling your story because you guys understand the benefits of native plants. Incorporating best management practices in your home garden. This is one of the things when we're talking pesticides, herbicides, nicotinoids. It's like start holding these people who are selling this plant materials to the fire and say, what are you doing? And let other people know that you can find nurseries that are not using those pesticides and herbicides and things that are dangerous to monarchs and to other pollinators. Engage in citizen science programs. This is one of my near and dear to my heart. There are so many great citizen science programs. You can go on Monarch Joint Venture. They have a larval reporting program. They have a milkweed reporting program. If you know anybody who flies a drone, this summer they are trialing. They have a program where they're trying to teach an AI app to recognize milkweed. And so far they've had an 80% accuracy, but now they are wanting to expand this program. So on their website, they have put out a call for drone operators to come and they'll load that app on and they'll help you. They're going to have those guys help collect milkweed data. And at the same time, while they're flying drones, then people who are old school biologists are going to be out there looking at milkweed. And so we're kind of doing a little comparison as to what can the researchers on the ground find versus the drones. And an 80% accuracy, I'm not worried. I think we'll get it. So if you know a drone operator, Journey North is one that we use. Our office actually goes and looks on Journey North. That's when we learn the monarchs are on the landscape. We can go out and say, as we know, we had monarchs reported in Duncan in March, I think it was March 26th. So monarchs have been reported across the state. So we use that to say, yeah, we better get out on landscape. We better start expecting, because even though milkweed is not up yet, monarchs will use what they can find as they're flying through. Henbit, don't mow that henbit, because they will actually nectar on that as they're trying to get north. So that's another great program. And they also have, they don't just do monarchs, they do milkweed, but they also do bald eagles. They have a multitude of reporting modules that actually can help researchers, university researchers, and private consultant environmental researchers look and see what's happening out there on the landscape. And another one of my favorite ones. And Patrick's smiling because he heard me like blow up today in another meeting. It's contact your community leaders and legislators. You know, if you want to see an ordinance where more native plants are being included, if you like what your community park system is doing, where they're building gardens, if there are things that you would like to see within your community, contact your legislators. You know, I always say monarchs are like pie. They can transcend all political boundaries. You may have a city council member who is, you know, maybe he did something that's not very popular, and maybe he's gotten in trouble and people are upset with him. Go to him and say, hey, would you be interested in promoting a monarch butterfly garden initiative? Because he's going to need a feel-good story to offset his bad. So again, it's, yeah, if you want to see something happen in your community, it's you know, you can go to your Chamber of Commerce, you can talk about having an ordinance with business landscaping. There are opportunities there to increase the monarch corridors, increase those garden corridors, increase those nectar resources, increase those milkweed resources. So for more information, I know most of you probably know the Okies from Oxford. That's probably the best source of information in Oklahoma. And they're constantly updating. They do meet and greets. They have all of the what to plant resources. They have the nurseries. They have everything you can need, a one-stop shop for what you need to do for pollinators and monarchs in Oklahoma. Fish and Wildlife Service, they are starting a they have a Save the Monarch website right now, but they are going to start a Center for Pollinator Conservation. And so that will be a national initiative, and we're really excited about that. I was on a call today about that. And so there's going to be a national initiative, which always means that there will be grant opportunities and other opportunities for us to work, because the monarch's it's not just in one place. This is a tri-national species. So we really do need international for that. Monarch Joint Venture, I can't speak highly enough about all of the programs they've got going on. They have all the science. If you're a science geek, they have a whole publication of all the most recent research that's being done for monarchs. They're getting ready to jump on pollinators. And of course, my people, my Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, they also have a ton of resources. That's their website if you're really interested in getting on the public portal and seeing, like I said, there are several organizations that you probably pay your bills to who are part of this Right of Ways Habitat Working Group. And if somebody like One Oak, if you get your electrical transmission, if you get your energy from One Oak, call them up and say, hey, I really, really appreciate that you guys are making a difference on us. And even OG&E, I have to say, at their solar arrays, they're actually doing some really good stuff. So call these people up. It's like, let's not always complain about that they're not doing enough. Let's recognize them for the things that they are doing and encourage them. So with that, do I have any questions?
Yeah, I wanted to remind everybody that one avenue you can pursue is like schools and libraries. I'm going to brag on Juliet back there in the corner. She has not only been running the library garden at the village for
Yeah.
a while, but she just recruited a new teacher who wants to put in a high school,
Yeah.
middle school garden, and so we're getting people together. You know, we're this group sponsored by the John Marshall High
Oh,
School.
yeah.
And Carrie there, the lady there, has done a fantastic job. And what's so great about that is, you know, you bring in students, if you do it at a library or a school, the students, right?
Mhm.
Parents so,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, the library system has been a bit of a challenge. Because.
I'm
you know,
actually going to take notes now.
You know, because what happens is, the librarians are overworked on the page, just like everybody else, you know. And, what can happen is if you go in there too rip-roaring with like, oh, this is the plan we intend to put in at your library, and it's like, it looks like it's this 50 plant, you know, thing, you know, they can get a little intimidated and just say, no, let's not do that this year, you know.
Yeah, what kind of work are you, what kind of work are you asking from us?
It's tricky. It's tricky.
Mhm.
But if anybody's interested and you've got a library close by, please talk to me and I'll help you reach out to the right people.
Because Holly has done the War Acres Library for you.
Yeah, Warwick's library is mine.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure every time I go and pick up my holds. There is
All
Holly.
right, thank you. Then when every now and then I get a library administrator, I say, oh, you gonna be cleaning that up soon? You know? So I've tried to train them to understand that a pollinator garden is not a raised down to the ground in the winter. That's not how you do it.
Yeah.
You know, you have some canes for the bees left, and you have some, you know, but so it's like, I'm sure like you got your ups and your downs and your happy days and not so happy days.
Also, if you would like to do a little plot or some pots or something and don't have any tools, the Metro Library System now lets you check out tools.
Wow.
So go on their webpage. They're not every branch, but most
So
of the
they're
branches.
trying to work with us, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, then one library will come along, like the village, like Juliet can tell you, both of us are paying this, but, oh, by the way, we're totally, getting rid of your garden because we're re-signing this and that. And you're like, okay, great, we've been working on this for how many years?
Yeah. Where would you like to put it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
as
I
if
can
we're-
do it. Where would you like to put it?
Right.
Yeah, because
right.
that's one of the things, it's like, we think about, you know, where can we get acres? I'm one of those people that I'm always looking for places to put a pollinator garden. There are initiatives out there, there's Monarchs in the Rough, which actually in Oklahoma, 13 golf courses signed on to this Monarchs in the Rough, where they're managing lands, not the course lands, but their side lands for pollinators. One of the initiatives we would really like to see is you know, faith for monarchs. It's like the church initiative. If you belong to a church affiliated with a larger church group, that's a wonderful way. That's idle lands that are sitting there that could be providing not just benefits for pollinators and monarchs, but also benefits for your congregation. So it's like you can think of like anything that would be a group initiative.
So if we go and talk to our city commissioner and tell him to put milkweed around the entrance to the city sign and, you know, stuff like that. Where you all bought all those plugs for Highway 35? I mean, it's not easy to find milkweed plants that you know are free of or just to get that many, and especially as plugs instead of. Where would you get, does Monarch Watch still?
Monarch Watch still has the milkweed market. In fact, I think they still actually have their grant program where municipalities, City of Norman actually used that several times for 2 different parks. So that, and I think they're taking applications like right now. So if you get on Monarch Watch. But they also have a milkweed market where you can buy milkweed Okies for Monarchs, they have a vendor list, which is really and actually pretty up to date. I know Bill Ferris, who probably a lot of you know, his opening of his nursery is this Saturday. So he's back on the market. Sanctuary Gardens sells at Norman. I think they might sell at Scissortail in this market, and they also sell at Norman. So it used to be the issue. You cannot find plant material, you cannot find seeds. There's a lot of people who are working together. Actually, even Federal Highways Administration is looking at a seed strategy so that we can get more native plant seeds out on the landscape. So yeah.
I'm embarrassed to tell you that I was looking for my seeds and I found several packets of monarch, milkweed seeds. It's too late to throw it out.
Well, my rule for native plants is get it out either at Thanksgiving or at Easter.
Yeah.
When is Easter?
Okay, so you don't think it's too late?
No,
Oh,
Easter
child.
Sunday. You can get it. Yeah, I mean, the recommendation is always wait till fall, but if you've got stuff, I always think, if you keep it in your fridge, it's 2 years out, it's still good, and I will hang on to it in fall. Now, if it's one of those things where I kept it in the fridge for like 5 years, then I would go
Plant
ahead.
it anytime.
Yeah, I would go and plant it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would plant it before this spring.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
figure out anything you've been holding on to and just clean out the box.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
kind of started doing.
Yeah.
I found a lot of good stuff.
Start fresh.
And I
Yeah.
planted some of it up,
Yeah.
with this, should I try it in pots just to see if it comes up and then transplant it, or do you think I just?
Well, I'm a biologist, I would experiment, so in
Okay.
pots.
Okay,
And we actually, Connor, can I call you out? We have a master propagator back here.
Just head of propagator.
So, Connor might be able to have some tips for you too, you might talk to them.
Milkweed. Can you take cuttings from milkweed and make it grow?
I accidentally did Viridis. It wasn't my intention. And I accidentally did it, and just like the right time. It was like it warmed up, we got some really big flooding rains, and I had been like tearing up a garden and stuck a piece in there, and I was like, oh, I'll come back and get that. And I did. And it did grow, but I think, Connor, what do you think? Can you?
Well, so currently at the nursery, we are growing 3 different kinds of weeds, and we've only done it by seed so far. But now that we have some plants to work with, we will be starting to try cuttings. And as far as our procedure goes, just take a cutting.
what nursery is that?
Midwest Propagation Nursery. So we'll take a cutting, give it root hormone, and put it in 60 count mimicry trays. And usually after 3 or 4 weeks, we have success with this about every day.
And what's gonna become of your savings? Where are you putting them?
Where are we putting? Oh, we're selling them.
Oh, you're
Putting them in your garden for us.
Yeah.
Until-
Yeah, write his nursery name down.
So when you put, you're propagating them, you enclose them?
We have a few different prop houses, propagation greenhouses. So with cuttings, we do have them on this. That is really important, respiration. So that's what we do.
How long do you leave it this big?
Well, it depends on the weather for that day, just because it's really, really cold. We don't want to get too wet. We don't break down. But as far as the schedule goes, it's pretty consistent.
So as long as they're stuck in the propagating bath, you're missing.
Oh, yeah. And right now our schedule is every 6 minutes, it's misted for 8 seconds. Because we just want to keep it wet, so because at the moment they're just going to lose water, with inspiration until they get roots, so they can start taking that water to get it.
Okay, back to the real world, lazy, disorganized, ordinary gardeners.
Uh-huh.
Can we get away with just keeping our milkweed seeds in the fridge?
Oh, yeah. That's good.
I've had mixed results with that.
And I'm just gonna guess, because I don't do this at my home, but if you do want to grow cuttings at home, big leaves, cheaper, and just keep the humidity up. It's it with yeah, really, really cheap these days for that.
But you sell yours gonna be sold? Where?
We sell at our nursery. We have the last 2 weeks of May, we'll have a big retail sale. But honestly, if you show up and call the number, it's gonna go straight to my cell phone. I'll be down there to show you around and I can sell you.
Okay, one more time. What is it?
It's called Midwest Propagation Nursery.
Okay.
This Sunday, we're gonna be at the Myriad Botanical Gardens. We're only selling about 6 different species, none of which we can get. And then May 13th, we're gonna be back for their flower and garden festival. So we're gonna we're doing pop-ups every once in a while, different locations. And our store is online as well. And so you all can purchase from there. Wow, what a great plug.
Okay, I get free plants, right?
Absolutely.
He's running off his dinner now.
No, it's so serendipitous that we had a later in. So other questions?
Back to community, talking to your community leaders right now, there's an opportunity to reach out to the city of Oklahoma City map for, and there's a survey. There's
Awesome.
also a fun map to go to and type in comments, suggestions.
Yeah, get it before they even get started, because it's always hard to like get them to roll back once they've like, yeah, we're gonna put bread for pears and for me there. Yeah, that's awesome.
I have a question. Last fall, I drove up to Lawrence, Kansas, and actually to the 30th anniversary of monarchs.
Mhm, yeah.
And on I-35, once it becomes turnpike in Kansas, about 100 miles, it's not mowed. And it was like driving through, you heard the stories of the pioneers going through, and the blue stem was as tall as the horse was. You felt that way, driving down
Oh, yeah.
I-35. And it was in September, so the goldenrods were in full bloom.
Oh, yeah.
The monarchs were there, and it just was like, this would be, if we could have, because Oklahoma's a prairie state,
Mhm.
and granted that we have a population, we need to convince that it was a prairie state, but what, and I know that you said, reach out to your legislators and everything, but what can we do to encourage ODOT to at least look at what they're doing in Kansas so that they can think about
Reach out to your legislators.
that? Reach out to the legislators. So,
Yeah.
the-
And like I said, I don't represent the agency.
Right, I
So
understand.
really, I can't speak to that,
Right.
but really and truly, everyone responds to feedback. So that is, I would say, you know, if you see something that you like, let them know.
Is that something that the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and Kansas Department of Transportation, Missouri Department, do the higher levels have conversations like that, or?
Well,
not so
if
much?
if it was the turnpike, you know, just like here, the turnpike and the DOT are separate.
Right,
So if this was the Kansas Turnpike, I don't know what the structure is there,
Right.
but you know, that could be totally different than KDOT. So I really can't speak to that.
Well, it sounds like they took we were gonna do the I-35.
Monarch Highway.
Yeah, it sounds like they took it to heart.
Well, I think they actually have been doing that longer than that. I mean, it looked like a mature standard.
Yeah, because you know, Iowa actually had They had a state initiative long before the Monarch Highway. They actually had decided, because agriculture was encroaching right on, I mean, they were playing right up to the gravel shoulders. And so they were seeing the grass disappear. And so the state of Iowa made that initiative, and they decided that their highway department was going to try to preserve a certain section of the grassland. And so that was a state initiative, and so that was long before the Monarch Highway.
Trust me, you've seen my driving, you don't like trying to take a picture here.
Question about the endangered status thing that I'm always been a little confused about. I get the feeling that it's what happens when it's actually listed. It becomes almost in a way more difficult to work with them because everybody's hamstrung by too many rules.
Well, it depends on the species. The monarch is really, that's why this CCAA got fast tracked and why it became so vital to have so many partners. It depends on what the species. Talking endangered species, everything like it.
Well, because you said something about it almost in a way more
Well,
beneficial to be a candidate.
Because then you get people on board, because it's like that hitting something on the head. It's like, this is it, we're listing it as endangered, and so everybody kind of pushes back on that. I know when the species, then all the lawsuits start flying, and then there is no benefit to the species. It's like, okay, they listed it, but now we have all these lawsuits that can take years. This species was petitioned in 2014, and for various reasons, there were a lot of species ahead of it. But if you designate it as a candidate, what we saw was, it's kind of like we're in the wings, we're waiting to be the queen, but right now we're in little princesses. But little princess is actually something. And so for a candidate species, it's like, oh, well, we've got to react. That's what happened here. And it's like industry is going to petition. We need to do something. And so they got together and they worked with the service. That menu of conservation measures that you saw, that was a lot of give and take between industry and the service, and the Farm Bureau had something to say. And all of a sudden, we've got people who would usually go through your corner because you got lists of species. Suddenly, all these people are talking to each other and they're trying to figure out a strategy. So what we saw under the umbrella of a candidate species, we got more conservation bang for the buck than we would have if they had just hit it in the head. So
Do you think they're hoping that it won't get listed if they do that?
what we do is we look at those conservation measures while it's candidate.
I mean, the
And you-
industry. I think industry got on board because they're hoping to keep it from getting listed.
Well, yeah, they're like everybody else. They don't know that. You want to be a participating partner at the table rather than having somebody say, you're this. And so they saw the wisdom of getting ahead. And it was painless. You never know what your regulations be. This way they have insurance. And that's what that agreement is. So everybody business as usual. We're providing benefit for the species. We're working together with other people in the industry. So we're sharing technology and techniques and strategy. Yeah, the candidate species is it's a good umbrella for a species that we know is going to be difficult to compare with the Indian.
But that may happen sooner than we thought, right?
Well, I think they feel that there might be an urgency for a listing, and we really don't know why. And what will happen after whatever they decide. but we're ahead of the game because we're doing this. conservation. I think our numbers this year are gonna be really pretty impressive. But the report is doing in May, that we really have made a difference with it.
Is there any data on cost savings for industry? Like, what I'm
Yeah.
thinking is,
Yeah,
it's cheaper not to mow.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, there's several DOTs and those were those, that research is available. Look it up. And actually, the people who have probably funded a lot of that cost savings have been the energy sector. They have been like really ahead of the game on this. I said you can go back. Oops. So you can look at acres by sector. Energy.
well, I'm thinking my employer, we have 150 acre campus and 4 acres. Our actual building,
Mhm. Yeah.
big grass that's mowed this time,
Mm-hmm.
all Bermuda,
Yeah. It
looks
starts-
really nice, green,
Yeah.
but
Starts with one garden.
You know,
I can
Dell
talk to them.
Computers went that way for years, but I don't know if they're still doing, it, but they, I know for years, they had other, you know, green garden area.
Yeah.
put in all the-
I mean, there's some landscaping and hiking and paved running trails, but there's still lots of acres.
Yeah, because
I don't know why they bother mowing it.
Hitachi has a sustainability office and they do, native landscape. Yeah,
The idea
Yeah, I'm
now.
gonna,
yeah,
especially with
absolutely.
Earth Day coming up, it's all gonna
telling you,
take this one. so.
Opens for Monarch, we have lots of designers, we have, go on that website, there's a wealth of information to help you do that. Go on the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, because they're looking at industry and business, building pollinator gardens and how you can landscape. Business and landscape that is still aesthetically pleasing, but still also.
So about the process for getting something declared endangered. When you started this process, it was almost 10 years ago, 2014, and you were using the data that you had at that time. So when they file these extensions and wait and don't do any of the things, does the submitting organization have to update all of those records? Do they look at the 2014 numbers and say, oh, well, I don't think this needs to be listed because look at it's doing, well, like you said, there was a 22% decline last year. So in the time that they're waiting and look at the petition, those original numbers that were
Yeah,
presented are not.
Yeah, they
basis anymore.
they update, we always say based on the best science. And it wasn't I'm just a state biologist, so it was the Fish and Wildlife Service. And then, like I said, there's many other candidates who are on that list prior to Monarch. So you don't know what the thought process was where they did not take more of an immediate action. They did say one. They did put it as a candidate.
It was warranted, but in other words, yeah, it makes sense to do it, but it is, there's
Yeah,
other
there's too
things
many
that
other,
take priority this year.
yeah.
Working on- It's really one.
Three
So
hours.
many.
Yeah.
That's true.
But as a candidate, because it did receive that designation after the petition, as a candidate, they were still looking at what they can do to benefit. So it, sometimes private organizations and nonprofits maybe get a little bit ahead of themselves and some things are coming down the pike, as we know, they move slowly, especially federal government slowly. And as a candidate species, it's still hitting some, and it's still being looked at and still being assessed every year on that list, as are a bunch of candidate species right now. So it's not that they weren't doing anything. I mean, I joke that, some biology got hot, but, it's on the radar and they are doing what they think is the best.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but
It can be a Debbie Downer subject sometimes.
curiosity. And no matter what we do here, that's next.
Actually, this is the thing. I don't know if you guys know Sarah Dykeman, who wrote Bicycles with Butterflies. She was just in the state on Friday. And so she has been down there. She's actually training parabiologists, a bunch of the ladies who live in the Biosphere Reserve. She's training them as parabiologists, and they are actually going out and gathering data on how the monarchs, what the monarchs are doing while they're overwintering. You know, it's something in the furs. You know, they're really active in the reserves, and so her parabiologists are going out and collecting data on day-to-day activities of these monarch butterflies. And so she was here, and I got the opportunity to have a good discussion with her, and she still feels, even though there is encroachment and there are problems within the reserves, she agrees with Bob Martin and the other folks at USGS. The real problem is here in Indiana. The real threats are, you know, once they leave that overwintering, those overwintering grounds, and they start coming up here, and it's like an empty grocery shop. They get up here and there's nothing. They're expending a whole lot of energy trying to find something. And what we need to do is, like, every little garden matters. It's like, you know, it's like having your Dollar General in the middle of nowhere. There is something. And so every little garden matters. And if we can string enough together, then we can give them a full grocery shelf.
But the important thing in that is not only that you have bread on the shelf, milk. but
Yes.
You've got to have something.
Nectar.
else. You've got to have the
Yeah.
things that some people think there's too much of,
Yeah.
needs to be cut down. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to have, it's vitally important to have spring nectar sources for those that are migrating up, because we're right in the middle of the Central Valley both ways. It's just as important. Nectar sources, golden rocks, the asters.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about Oklahoma, is that just because of our growing cycle question, that, you know, we do have all of these plant species, you know, golden. Just talk about, oh my gosh, what a great fall nectaring plant. You know, we have these asters. We have so many nectaring plants that provide a lot of resources for them going back as well as going north.
So Vonceil, what's the latest word on tropical milkweed? First, they complained about the fact that it harbors the IO, and
Yeah.
and so you don't want it to overwinter in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But I always feel like at this time of year, we stopped at a garden center, and they said, well, they have tropical milkweed.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the first thing you can buy. So if you can get that out there, I always feel like in the spring that it's really necessary. And then later on, my asparagus and the tuberosa and all of those other will come in. But I always feel like in the spring, if I can get some tropical out there real quick, then they'll have something as they're migrating north. That are they trying to disperse that altogether now, or is it
Well,
still-
you know, there's been several studies on tropical milkweed, and I think the thing is that, you know, it doesn't overwinter in Oklahoma. But what you're talking about, buying it early in the spring, it is a tropical plant. So yeah, you may just be buying it, but you're throwing your money away if you get a cold snap, like we usually do mid-April.
Well,
Yeah, to plant it right now, it's not going to provide as much benefit. You know, like I said, it takes 29 cents for one migrating butterfly. So if you buy a tropical milkweed and a female comes through and lays eggs, are you going to have enough milkweed to sustain that caterpillar? And it's going to grow 2,000 times what it is when it's born. I think about planting time, but I would encourage you to think about planting whatever you're going to plant. Think about the monarch's migration cycle, and are you providing benefit? And I'm just not sure one or two plants of tropical milkweed early in the spring are going to provide any benefit.
Got some recommendations though. In addition to leaving your hen bed alone, you got any other
Because I'm trying to think of what I've seen early on, that they,
Dandelion?
well, I haven't seen them nectar on dandelions, but what I have seen them is the red clover, which a lot of farmers use. You know, if you go out east of Oklahoma, there's red clover in all of those fields. And
It's a great
I-
cover crop too.
Yeah,
Helps
it's a
your
great
soil.
cover, yeah, there's so many benefits from that. But it
I would
also is
also-
very invasive in the home.
I would also
landscape.
encourage golden ragwort, which is.
Yeah, and I've
this time of year, had this
I've seen a
ragwort.
lot more of it just recently, and I think because we're wetter this year. Yeah, but I do know that henbit and what I've seen is the red clover. And it depends on what part of the state you're in too. You know, I'm starting to see maybe some milkweed leaves.
It's so frustrating though, because you almost wonder what Mother Nature is up to, because I think most people in this area, your milkweed naturally comes back like later than that, not in time.
Yeah, because they want, you know, really their breeding grounds. They're prime site breeding.
So mainly what we're trying to do here
Yeah.
is just give us.
Give
some
them
energy
enough
to
resources to
go on.
get to the main breeding. But, you know, 3 years ago, they stayed and stayed and stayed. We were finding caterpillars in July in western Oklahoma. So, you know, the climatic changes, just what I've seen in the last few years, that's starting to really knock some things out. And so we as gardeners and native plant aficionados, and, you know, invert fans, we really have to see not just, you know, we have to see what's really benefiting and how the changes are happening when we adapt that to help the species.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a comment. Since I
Yay!
do
How are ya?
monitor several locations with pollinator gardens. If you have perennial milkweed, it is actually popping up. Yes, they will find the new stems and lay eggs. The key really is to have enough of it, because if you only have one or two little perennial plants that are popping up, what will happen is if your neighbors don't have any, they'll try and egg bomb them, and you'll end up with a ton of eggs that won't be able to support all the caterpillars. But if you have a good patch of perennial milkweed, it is actually already up both in Norman and OKC.
That's where I saw it.
They are timed, yeah, my reports are on Journey North.
Yeah.
Norman and downtown OKC.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do actually come through about the same time as the milkweed pops up generally. So that you don't have to go buy a bunch of annual milkweed plants. If you've got perennial and it's already established, it will pop up about the same.
My parsley's been decimated by what I always thought were the caterpillars of monarchs. The striped ones.
No,
parsley.
Swallowtail.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's completely different.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that
last,
makes sense, but
yeah, last week I saw a swallowtail. skin through,
Okay.
so. Yeah, you.
Yeah, I know. I just hope they would, because every get to do milkweed, and I go, well, I have something that they eat that isn't
Yeah.
milkweed.
Yeah, yay.
And swallowtails, the ones that litter over.
Mhm.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah, they just started popping up. Got probably before I saw it.
I guess one thing we all should do is try to make sure to educate everybody to leave the blue vines alone. You know, the milkweed vine.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because everybody thinks that's a weed. And
Well, I used to pull it out because I thought it was morning.
yeah,
And
everybody,
then
I used to
one
pull it
time
out.
I missed a vine and the flower is obviously melted. But
Yeah.
I mean, probably for 20 years, I pulled
Wow.
mine out.
Sounds like a good project for the ONPS website. People said, this is what blue line is.
Yeah, I think they do that. I think
Hi, I like it.
So quick reminder, we don't have a meeting in May, but we do have the Wonders of Wildflower Weekend. If you've not been, I strongly encourage you, open your Galardia. If you got one in the mail, if you're a member and you don't have a Galardia that's got to sign up, jump online to oknativeplants.org and you can sign up for the Wild Weekend. It's going to be down at Wichita National Wildlife Refuge. And there's been lots of fall and winter rain, the flowers should be beguiling, beautiful. Only to be eclipsed by the people that you meet. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.